everybody. Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 482. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's up, buddy? How goes?
Well, things are great. I'm coming off of a successful coverage weekend in Los Angeles. That was a ton of fun.
We had fun, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, it was good. Even though, we did have to be in the booth at least once or twice. That was unfortunate. But other than that.
You mean together?
Yeah.
Once or twice? Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting. Andy, who was kind of producing the show, said, look, I want you guys to let go, have some fun. I want a different vibe for this thing. And he really wanted to try something different. And I said, look, Andy, I can give that to you. But are you sure you want where you're at? Like, it's me and Huey, and Huey and I just looked at each other, and I just said, let's just do because Huey and I joke around all the time.
This is how you end up with Huey and Marshall dabbing.
Yes, and then it just degenerated quickly to dabbing and singing. But it was really fun to do, and people seem to like it. So hopefully you had a chance to check out some of the coverage there. I
had a great time. I also profited a tie clip that I'm playing with right now.
Oh, you took my tie clip. Unbelievable. I hope I gave you a bad one. I don't think I did. I think I gave you a sweet one. Yeah. Wow. So who's the real winner of the GP? I guess it's
Michael
you.
Burnett, actually.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So first things first, much like that GP, this show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. They try to bring you the best content available, and I do a really good job of it. It is difficult to choose how and what to bring to the masses. It can be a bit of a minefield trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And so CFB, well, they kind of do it all. They've got podcasts like this one, videos and articles by some of the best players in the world right on the front page of channelfireball.com. GP coverage every once in a while. That's awesome. I know everybody really appreciated getting a chance to see GPs. Everybody loves to watch them. And while you're at CFB, you can find everything you need, magically speaking, on the site as well. You can find sealed product, singles, supplies, anything you need to play this great game that we all love is going to be there. And if you live in the United States and you order more than $75, you're going to get free shipping, which is awesome. A great way to help cut down those costs. CFB, everybody, we know how expensive Magic can be. And you just got to find those little loopholes, those little bits of value here and there. Free shipping, get a little bit of store credit on the trade-in, and next thing you know, you got a box of the new set in your hands quickly. And of course, they're always going to stand by their product. That is channelfireball.com. You can support the show directly via the Patreon. If this is a show that you enjoy week in and week out, if you like hanging out with Luis and I, you think you've gotten something out of it, well, that's a great way to go back and give right back to the show. Patreon.com/limited resources. Speaking of, I've got a playmat here. What is this card? This is a Phoenix of some sort, though I can't remember which one.
Probably Rekindling Phoenix. I seem to recall that on a playmat.
No, it is not. This is old. Let's see. This is from 2014.
Oh.
Grand Prix Ottawa.
Well, I didn't go to that one, so I don't really know which 2000 Flamewake Phoenix has to be Khans of Tarkir. Yeah.
Okay, I'm in. Flamewake Phoenix probably. Playmat is going to go to Philip Elliott from Santa Cruz, California. Thank you, Philip, for being on the Patreon. And then we've got a Crack-A-Pack here too. And again, we've still got, we're halfway done. We've got 4 more of these special packs. And let's get into this right now. So this is a Ravnica Allegiance pack that happens to have a very special Planeswalker in it that we will be giving away to one of our patrons. So first things first, though, Rebel Belt Recluse, 4 and a red, 6/5, must attack. I like it. Yeah. I like it at the 5-ball slot. That card hits really hard, and you really does demand an answer quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I find it to be less important in Gruul because Gruul has some other heavy hitters, but I really like having like 1 in my Rakdos decks as just like the high end of the curve.
I do too. The 5 toughness is a ton, and Rakdos tends to hit from a different angle in this set. And when you drop a Rebel Belt Recluse as your curve topper, it's a real problem. I mean, there's not, much of the removal does not kill it. And like I said, it hits super hard. That said, 5 mana spells, relatively replaceable. We'll be talking about that for our main topic in just a little bit. This one is a 5 mana spell that is below replacement level. It's Knight of Sorrows, 4 and a white, 3/3 that can block extra things and has Afterlife 1.
I think I put this into my deck once and it wasn't good.
Yeah, it's not good. Also, I think it's time we got rid of can block multiple creatures at once. How many times have you seen people actually just know and figure out how that works on the first try?
No, almost never.
It's never, right? It's just, and it's not like it's a good I mean, it's a whatever.
It's not a lot of fun. No, it's also
not a lot of fun, and the ability isn't like so important that we need to have it in our.
It's also kind of like an on the board trick, which is one of the things we talk about where your opponent attacks you, they think it's for lethal, and then you just block 2 of their creatures, and they're just like, oh. It can lead to some somewhat disappointing moments. I'm not saying that Magic should be, too easy to play, but we're in no danger of that. So
right. Next is Slime Bind, a card I really like. 1 in a blue flash enchantment that gives a creature -4/-0. I play this card all the time, Luis.
It's great in Azorius. It's passable in Simic, especially Flying Simic, and it's really good in the Gates deck. So. Yeah. Or Esper, like the Dovin's Acuity deck. So yeah, I like Slimebind. I mean, I hope not to be first picking Slimebind, but it is a card that's going to make my deck a lot of the time.
Can we name it the Blue Swords to Plowshares? The new Blue Swords?
No, that's not a very good analogy. It's the blue Terminate because it costs 2 mana.
Oh yeah, obviously. Gift of Strength, kind of running.
It's actually better than Terminate if you think about it because it doesn't trigger their afterlife. So.
Oh wow! Look at that. Better than Terminate. Gift of Strength, run-of-the-mill combat trick. Nothing to see here. Footlight Fiend, sure, he makes a cut. Rakdos Hybrid for a 1/1 that when it dies, you can do 1 damage to
I like it with B.R.E.A.D, as do many other people.
Which, by the way, is our next card.
Also a fine card. I think I'd first pick Slimebind over B.R.E.A.D, but this is a kind of below-average pack so far.
It is so far, but that's about to change because we've got Skewer the Critics.
All right. Well, this is Skewer along with Grotesque Demise, Blade Juggler, and Soroform Hybrid are basically like kind of the top tier of commons. So
yeah, and Skewer's great.
At least the monocolor ones. And, Grasping Thrall and Law Mage's Binding kind of making up for the multicolors. But either way, yeah, Skewer's a great first pick and certainly where we're at right now.
Definitely. Growth Spiral will not be the card to take us off of that. I have not loved Growth Spiral really in any deck. I have ran it in my Gates decks on Arena, but I'm hardly even counting those at this point, and even then it's not great. Our last common, actually, I'm glad this one came up. It's Clear the Mind. 2 in a blue sorcery. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library, draw a card. We've been messing around with drafting this quite a bit. It's kind of this like creature list, although that's not actually how it plays out, but low creature, kind of not really going to be attacking that much type deck. And a few interesting things to note about Clear the Mind. The first one is that it ends up playing out in a similar way to how Devious Cover-Up played out, which is that you almost never actually deck your opponent by looping Clear the Mind. You just increase the spell density of your deck so much that you just overwhelm them. And sometimes they do get decked if you have a few Thought Collapse. And then the other thing to note about Clear the Mind is, oh my God, the team Ultimate Guard Pro team, the Pantheon, if you will, they really pushed hard for this deck at the Pro Tour, at the Mythic Championship, and they crushed with it. My God.
They had an obscene limited win percentage. It was like above 80%.
Yeah. And they were maybe not forcing, but they were heavily inclined for Clear the Mind. I think they had something
like 4 3-0s, 4 trophies with Clear the Mind decks, of a total of 12 possible drafts, right? Each person does 2 drafts. So
wow.
It was insane. If you look at kind of like Reed, Duke, or Huey Jensen, or Andrew Cunio's Twitter, or John Finkel's actually, I think all of them posted pictures of some 3-0 kind of like Azorius Clear the Mind Acuity decks. And yeah, they really did a great job in Limited.
Yeah, I asked Reed about the Clear the Mind deck, and this is a direct quote from Reed. He said, "It turns out there actually is a reason to have Andrew Cunio on your testing team."
Jeez, Reed. They really got there. And for that, well, it's a good beat, first of all. For a second, they're not first picking Clear the Mind. The whole point is that you can wheel it, or you can get a 6 pack.
Yeah, and it speaks more to a strategy rather than the specific.
I don't think they are first picking Slimebind over Skewer the Critics, but they're certainly taking Slimebind over Clear the Mind with the expectation of getting the Clear the Mind later.
Mm-hmm. And definitely wanted to go that way. Also, Reed never actually said that. Mortify, boom. One of the best uncommons in the set. 1 black-white destroy target creature, enchantment at instant speed. Killing enchantments is
awesome in this set. There's just a lot of good enchantments, not that many ways to kill them. So yeah, I'm taking Mortify over every common.
Same. Cry of the Carnarium, the 1 black, everything gets -2/-2. And then for you rules buffs, yes, it gets a little bit weird, but basically everything gets exiled that was killed this way or killed prior to you casting that this turn.
This card's stupid, and it knocked me out of the top 8. So,
oh yeah,
I don't actually like it much in limited because it's just not good in most Orzhov or Rakdos decks, and most of the decks it's good in have a hard time casting it at 1 BB. So,
yep,
I'm certainly taking really Mortify then Skewer over it.
Same. Incubation Incongruity is next. Incubation's the Simic hybrid. Lets you look at the top 5 cards and reveal a creature at sorcery speed. Put it in your hand. And Incongruity is the 1 green blue exile a creature. They get a 3/3. I think this card is not like people cast this card against me all the time. I never value it very highly, and I almost never see it as a result. And I think it's fringe playable. I mean, sure, Incubation's fine, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that card, but it doesn't actually do a whole lot either.
Yeah,
and Incongruity
this card's nothing exciting.
Our rare, or I guess I'll mention our gate is a Orzhov Guild gate. Maybe we could get that back for our Mortify. Our rare is a nice one though. This is a real discussion here. It's Gruul Spellbreaker, the 1 red-green 3/3 with Riot, Trample, and as long as it's your turn, you and it gets hexproof.
Yeah,
that's a lot of power.
This card's good. I would still take Mortify. I think that the cards are of comparable power levels, but Mortify is pretty easily splashable, and Spellbreaker is not a very exciting splash. Plus, Orzhov is a lot better than Gruul. So,
yeah,
wouldn't fault you if you really wanted a Spellbreaker there, but I think I would just start with Mortify.
I mean, you just put him in the arena, right?
Oh yeah, the Mortify doesn't win the first turn because you get to haste the Spellbreaker and have hexproof. But
that's true. But it wins in the end.
Yes, it does.
All right, now, and by the way, I'm with you on that. I would definitely take Mortify out of that pack. I would much rather be in that. And this is something we're going to talk about, by the way, on the show. When 2 cards are of comparable power level, how do you do a tiebreaker? And one of the ways you can do it is by saying, I'd rather be in black-white than in green-red.
Oh, I was going to say there's 2 main tiebreakers they use. One is which wins in the head-to-head, and the other is the acronym B.R.E.A.D. But anyway, let's
yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. We do have a sweet full art planeswalker here, and it's a nice one. Karn, Scion of Urza. Ooh, that looks sweet too. And this one's going to go to Ryan Sturm. Ooh, that means storm in German. From Lancaster, New York. Thank you, Ryan.
Sturm's McKenzie there.
There we go. Okay, so that's that. Let's get into our main topic. So first things first, historically speaking, this is a topic that is near and dear to LR's heart. In fact, this was, I think, our second episode ever. We covered a similar topic, which was, we called it Breaking Bread. And we're going to be going much deeper into that this time, though. But we will start off with the general premise of this, which is when you first learn how to play Limited, somebody, and invariably somebody will come out of the woodwork at your local shop or a friend of yours or somebody online, and they will say, this is how you draft. All you need to know is B.R.E.A.D, B-R-E-A-D. It's an acronym, and it's going to help you, help you be a better drafter. And it's a shortcut, right? It's a way for you to remember something, at least ostensibly remember something simple and easy to remember, though nobody actually knows what all the letters stand for, only the first 3 that actually matter, which are bombs, removal, and evasion. And then the rest ends up being, I don't know, something stupid. Dudes or dregs or something. I can't remember what the A stands for. And we've talked about, on the show, we've dedicated an entire episode to heuristics, shortcuts that help you navigate complicated problems, and how useful we think they can be. They can be really useful to get you through a game. In fact, they're probably just straight up necessary given how complicated Magic is. You couldn't take every single situation as a novel new thing and break it down from the top down. But we've also warned against relying on them too heavily, because if you autopilot, as it were, too often, then you will be missing a lot of equity, and you will not be playing.
I love heuristics. I think heuristics are, we've had whole episodes dedicated to them, and they really help in both learning and retention. So
right, yeah. So super important part of the game, but Magic is a game of exceptions, and adhering blindly to a set of preconceived rules, well, you're not really optimizing at that point, right? You're kind of getting that first chunk of, okay, well, I went from 0 to 60% by doing this, but you want to go further.
Yeah, and if you've never heard of bread, that doesn't really matter. That's more of a kind of a joke, because we're obviously on the low carb diet here. Bread has actually fallen out of favor, both in terms of people's actual diets and in terms of how people learn about limited.
But people still talk about it, dude. They still do. It's still out there. We have not won this war yet. But people still say
my point is that regardless of whether or not people use that, it's very useful for us to give an overview of how, your kind of basic hierarchy when you approach opening packs and kind of like the things you look for as you go out throughout the draft.
Right. Because look, the problem with B.R.E.A.D is that it breaks down very quickly, right? Pack one, pick one. Yeah. Okay. You want to take bombs over removal. You want to take removal over evasion. I mean, if we substitute evasion for like efficient or good creatures, sure, I'm on board for that. But as early as the second pack of the draft, it starts to fall apart already. It already starts to challenge you where, let's say you open up a bomb and you take it, and then you get past a bomb that's in totally different colors. Now what do you do? There's a good card in the colors that's already in your bomb. Now what do you do? Right. And so this whole thing just falls apart so quickly that it ends up being effectively useless. So we thought, look, if this is such a blunt tool, it wears itself out almost immediately. What could we do better here, right? What is my and yours, Luis, and what should be your actual algorithm, right? What is the hierarchy of things that you consider when you go to make a pick? And that can be pack one, pick one, or even, pack three, pick six, or something way down the line where things have changed.
You're asking what our bread replacement is, and that's protein, which stands for. No, actually, I don't have it.
No, don't even.
Premium cards.
Wait, power. Yeah. Power actually happens to be our first one. So maybe you could make this work.
Right, I don't know. I'll work on this. Power removal.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, I was really trying to think of this the other day, and I'm challenging Luis on this too. So this is what we've come up with as. All right, what are the things that we're actually considering hierarchically speaking?
Because the other thing is,
it's not bombs removal and evasion. No. That's not how I approach draft.
And the other thing is, when you would watch us or listen to us do a crack a pack, or you watch a streamer draft, or you just watch a draft viewer from a big tournament, where you don't get any commentary because you're just watching the player draft. What is going through all of these players' heads when they make these picks? Because we don't explain every single reason that we make a pick, even if we do go into some detail. And this gives you the background that we kind of, at this point, instinctively all process.
Right. And what we'll usually talk about are the specific interesting moments when these things pop up, right? That's, if you watch a draft video or something, that's what people will harp on, but you'll rarely hear them break it down to this level of sort of fundamentals. No. And that's what we want to go into here. So put the bread back on the shelf. We're not going to be using that anymore. And we don't have a flashy acronym.
Pick
and
up
you
the
know
protein.
What? Pick up the protein. It's better that way anyway, because that's kind of the point of this whole thing. And we'll touch on this again, is that
there's not a strict order.
Isn't about that. Yes, it's not about a strict order. It's not about an acronym that will save you, right? It doesn't work that way. In limited, you have to put the time in. You have to understand each of these concepts at least well enough to know which one's more important than the other ones. And once you get to that point, it'll click for you and you'll be like, I'm getting it. I'm doing it. I'm making these decisions and I have reasons for each of these decisions. But if you don't have that baseline understanding of what the factors are and how to weigh them, well, you can't. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's start with the first and easily most important thing. And this is the
easiest.
It's also the easiest, for most people as well. And that is raw power. It's just power. The power level of the card is the thing that is most important. And anytime you're considering picking a card that is less powerful, you need, than another card that you could play in your deck, you need to have a really good reason to do so. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of spots where that could be the case. But the baseline, the thread that is woven between all of these other factors is how good is this card? How much does it affect the game? How powerful is it? And it's an abstract concept, right? But broadly speaking, I'm looking to take the most powerful castable option in each pick that I could do. It could be a bomb, but it could also be like an efficient removal spell.
Well, I'm actually going to disagree a little. It's okay. Not you're not looking at taking the most powerful, because some packs the most powerful card just isn't very good, or the most powerful. What? Like if you open a pack and the most powerful card is Rakdos Firewheeler, you're still taking Blade Juggler because there's a lot of other factors. When I think of the raw power part of this pick, I think of like any card that's a 9 or above, that's a first pick, because then you're talking all just the best of the best. So like the first part of the category is just what's in your rare slot or what's in your uncommon slots, because there's just a bunch of auto picks there.
Well, because they're the most powerful. Again, my point isn't that you literally take the most powerful option. My point is that you always look to those first, because those are what's most important. And those are what you weigh everything against. Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I
look at the Firewheeler first. I look at that card and I think that's the most powerful. What is it going to take for me to not take that card?
Right.
Right. And there are other factors that would make me not take it. But the thing that weaves all this together is the fact that I'm weighing the power level of that card versus the power level plus other considerations of another card. And so, again, to me, it's the foundation. It is the I have to talk myself out of the most powerful card every time. And there are reasons why I would do that. But again, my starting point is what's the most rawly powerful card.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's important. Like, last week we talked about in the limited meeting, how we broke down the different tiers of cards. It's important to know what the cards are in the first couple tiers, because those are the cards you just like the rares you take over every non-rare. And then the uncommons you take over every common, and then the rares that fall somewhere in between those.
Right. But why?
It's
because they're the most powerful cards.
Well, it's a combination of power and other things, but I mean, we're not saying anything that's like completely different here, but I think that there's just like, when I look at like the first thing I look for is raw power. It's not just power on like in a vacuum. It's not like, because it is relative. There are power.
No, it is power in a vacuum. That's what I'm saying. It is exactly power in a vacuum. And then you take that baseline and you apply the things that we're going to talk about after that to that. Like, you have to be swayed off of certain cards that are super powerful because of the reasons that we're going to talk about coming forward. Like, well,
sure.
Like,
I more think that like Rakdos Firewheeler doesn't fall into this category exactly for me, because it has those other things going on, which again, we're going to talk about those other things. But
me too. But the power level's there, right? Like, again, you need to be talked away from those because of those things. But when it comes to breaking this down to its absolute fundamentals, right? You're adding the two things together. You're saying it's the most powerful option, but it's really hard to cast. Right. And I'm saying let's break those two things apart and look at one and then the other.
If you want a heuristic, one of the important things to know is what are the best cards in the set, and just full stop.
For sure.
And because I like being able to know I should first pick. Every time I see, ethereal absolution or mass manipulation, I should take it is a really good shorthand, because those are those cards you just don't get as much experience with every single rare, and those are probably not even good examples because they're so obviously good. But like, I just think it's good to have this like mental list of cards that you're safe just always first picking, because that's really comforting.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that makes sense to me. It's just I'm trying to go one step further and to say, well, why are those cards on that list? And the most basic obvious answer is because they're the most powerful cards in the set. Yeah. That is what we value the most. We don't value flexibility the most. We don't value
power level. Power level is certainly the most important.
Right. And this is a simple concept, right? I mean, this is just basic. It's just that if you don't have this, then people start applying stuff in crazy ways where they're like, well, I want to take the most flexible pick. And you're like, but so I'm going to take this monocolor card. And you're like, but ethereal absolutions in this thing. What matters more is that its raw power is, much, much bigger.
Yeah.
Then the next step that I take as we start to like layer on top of this is kind of a broad topic called that we're calling like chance of making the deck. Right. And this is kind of an umbrella that covers a couple of
without getting
things.
too equation-y, I think, because it's not like we are sitting here literally crunching numbers. Right. When we look at a pick one, pack one, we look at the power level, so we just talked about, but also kind of like multiplied by the chance it makes your deck. And what that means is a gold card is a lot less likely to make your deck than a monocolor card. So I'm going to take a monocolor card, like imagine a 3-color card, right? Especially in a set that doesn't have a lot of 3-color cards. Like Arcadia's Sabbath actually is a great example from was it M19, where if you could just cast Arcades, it's busted, right? It's like a 4 mana, 5/5 essentially, or whatever, it's a 3/5, 3/6, and it has all the good abilities. but it costs 3 colors. So clearly you're just looking at taking a monocolor removal spell over it, because Arcades makes your deck like 20% of the time if you pick one, pack one.
Exactly. It's very difficult, especially in that particular set where the fixing wasn't as great. So you almost never would actually get to cast it.
Right.
Even though the power level was obviously much higher.
Whereas a monocolor card, makes your deck a lot of the time. Not 100%, because if you're drafting well, if you're drafting the hard way, if you're actually taking these lessons to heart, then you're willing to abandon your first pick, because that'll happen a lot of the time. And it's funny that the better you get at draft, the more likely you are to abandon your first pick, which actually kind of seems counterintuitive, because I think a lot of people would say, like, if you're really good at draft, you'll be able to first pick your whatever and make a deck out of it. But it's actually kind of the opposite. It
is actually the opposite. Yeah.
Well, we would mention this actually on the side. This is kind of an aside. Someone actually looked at all the like recorded gold level drafts from a bunch of Pro Tours and a bunch of draft videos. And everyone just always plays their first pick. It's like above 65% of the time or something.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
I mean, this includes people like Ben S, who's like, I abandon my first pick all the time. It's just hard to do that. But what we talk about here, when we talk about chance of making the deck, it's not a strict equation, because if a card's 50% to make your deck versus a card that's 100% to make your deck, it's not that you will take a card that's half as good because it's twice as likely, because power level doesn't work that way. A 10 is much, 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 much better than twice as good as a 5. Like a 7 is twice as good as a 5. So,
exactly.
So it doesn't scale exactly, but it's kind of like on our grading scale, right? A, B, A through F. Gold cards get like a kind of half grade negative modifier, where we're going to take like a B- over a B, like a B- monocolor card over a B gold card in a lot of cases, because we get to play the B- so much more often. It effectively counts for more.
Right. And that's huge, right?
Totally.
Like that is a major indicator. Like, again, you've taken your baseline power level and you've applied just one factor so far. And we are trying to do these roughly in order, so it is one of the biggest factors, but still that's massive, right? I mean, that right there just takes you right away from, okay, bread, right? Like I just can't use something that simple anymore, because now we're already layering on two things that don't really have anything to do with each other. And you have to like now break that down in real time or ahead of time if you're willing to put in the work and figure out, okay, well, how much likely? And again, I do want to stress what Luis said. You're not actually coming up with numbers in your head, because I don't even know how to come up with those numbers, but you certainly know that if you take a CCDD card versus a monocolored card, your chances of playing the monocolor card are so much higher.
Yeah. I mean, even again, like, let's even throw out the guild set and assume all color pairs are valid. And at this point, every set has gold cards in it pretty much. So a mono red card can get played in 4 different 2-color combinations, whereas a red black card gets played in exactly red black. So huge difference. And in guild sets like this one and the last one, it's a little smaller because a mono black card gets played in 2 different color combinations, essentially just like Orzhov and Rakdos. So it's not insane to take a Rakdos card over a mono black card, especially if it's an aggressive one, because those often go together. But it's still you're still kind of twice as likely, right? And just roughly, and that doesn't count splashing. Again, it's always more complicated, but once you get into the real science stuff, you can run the numbers. But let's kind of break down the two different kind of main ways we look at this. The first is just literally castability, and this is what we're talking about when it comes to different colors. So, a good example of that is pick one, pack one. You would rather take Chillbringer than Frilled Mystic, even though Frilled Mystic's a better card. Like,
more powerful card for sure.
And here, this is a concession to the fact that Chillbringer goes in both Azorius and Simic, and you don't know which one you're going to be drafting. So, I would say that like Frilled Mystic is around an 8 on a 1 through 10 scale, and Chillbringer is around a 7. So look, I'm willing to take a card that's a point worse because it's a lot more flexible. I mean, Chillbringer actually even gets bonus points, is that you can splash it in Gruul, and it's kind of acceptable to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So ultra flexible.
And then even if when you drill it down a little bit more, or use a different example, Chillbringer, I think at the start is better than Aeromunculus, because Aeromunculus is a 2-color card, even though if you knew you were Simic, you'd rather have Aeromunculus. And the CCDD cards, the double doubles like Chillbringer or Rakdos Firewheeler, are even more extreme, because like completely unsplashable, and even some 2-color decks sometimes have problems with them. But the point remains that you would rather just start with a monocolor card, and this is why we do discount these gold cards.
You meant Mystic, right?
Yes, sorry. Another consideration is mana cost. Not. This isn't looking at the colored symbols at all. And basically, your deck has more room for cards that cost between 2 and 4 mana than 5 and above. And this is a lesson I learned at great personal cost. Over
the course of many years.
It took a long time. But you get this information right now for free. And it's a lot more efficient. You had to do so much less losing to learn this, which is, all things being equal, the shorthand is take the cheaper card. And the reason is at the end of the draft, if you have 6 cards that cost 5 or 6 mana and 4 2-drops or something, or 3 2-drops, you could be in trouble. Whereas if you have 5 or 6 2-drops and 4 cards that cost 5 or more mana, that's totally fine. You are more, basically, it's an investment in the future, right? If you take the slightly better 5-drop over the slightly worse 2-drop, that's close, but you take the 5-drop, then later in the draft, you might be in a position where you have to take the much worse 2-drop over the better 5-drop.
Yeah, and that is an interesting spot that comes up a lot too, right? If your deck has a specific need of 2 mana creatures, you may be forced to take mediocre 2 mana, even ones that you don't really want, just to try to fit your abilities. Right, over a card that normally you would be, that is much more powerful. Not even at 5 mana, it can be at 3 or 4 mana, or even another 2-drop. But you just need the thing, to make your deck function, and that's right away. Like, you've taken power level and you've thrown it out the window, right? You did not make that pick based solely on power level. Instead, you made it based on other considerations, in this case, castability.
Yeah. And, let's say you take the slightly worse 2-drop over the better 5-drop, and later you see a better 2-drop. It's not like you got screwed there either. You just end up with another good 2-drop.
Totally.
It's very important. And when we look at, pick 1, pack 1, or pick 1, pack 3, this goes beyond just first pick. We look at, what is our curve going to look like? And we're trying to guard against the disaster scenario of just having a bad curve. So you do have to really prioritize lower cost and cost cards over more expensive ones, even when you're not playing an aggressive deck. This isn't aggro only. What you said, Marshall, does even more strongly apply to aggro. And that's the example when you're taking 2 mana, 2/1, no abilities over a sick 4-drop. Because it's like, I need 7 2-drops or my deck literally doesn't function. I have a spectacle deck with, 3 blade jugglers. I'm taking 2-drops over everything. That's when the Pharaoh Makas get in there.
Right, exactly.
But even in a control deck, you can't sit there and just play all 5 and 6 mana cards and expect to win games. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Power level only takes you so far. If you have all the most powerful cards in the set, but you can't cast them in a timely fashion, you're going to lose anyway. Doesn't matter.
So besides castability, which is both, colored symbols and just like literally converted mana cost, there's also flexibility. This is an important concept where this has nothing to do with the actual casting cost. It's like, what is the effect of the card? And an example is Law Mage's Binding versus High Alert. These cards cost exactly the same, right? Literally the same casting cost. But Law Mage's Binding will go into every single blue-white deck, and High Alert goes into in this format, probably half the blue-white decks want High Alert.
Yeah, more than you'd think at first glance, but still not all of them.
Right. Yeah. And even though there are definitely blue-white decks, there's definitely Azorius decks that pick 3, pack 1 are taking High Alert over Law Mage's Binding. You don't know that you're going to end up there, and it's much safer to take Law Mage's Binding, pick 1, pack 1. And these cards are kind of close in power level. There's probably other examples where there's even more of a gap in power level where you're still just taking the safer card, because how flexible a card is really important. The more synergy-based cards tend to be less flexible because they care about what other cards are in your deck. And not even all things being equal, even when things are close, it's better to take the more open-ended card.
Yeah. And also, one thing that's interesting to note about like a use case on how this actually plays out is that at the beginning of a draft, flexibility matters to you a lot. Right. A lot of the examples that we just gave about basically, in an effort to stay open, you take cards that are maybe a little bit less powerful, but easier to cast or have a better mana cost as far as colors go. But as the draft proceeds, the flexibility factor goes down and down and down, because once you know that you're this specific color pair or this grouping of colors or this type of deck, well, now you're just considering you're back kind of on power level again, because you're not looking to be flexible anymore. Right. You're not looking to try to change
flexibility is
colors.
Powerful when you don't know which direction you're going. Once you're pretty firmly on a path, just throw flexibility out the window. Like it doesn't matter. You're actually just looking at power level. To go back to some of the like double talk, once you know you're just like locked in on Orzhov, then the Basilica Bellhaunt should just be measured against other Orzhov cards equally. Like you're just going to take Bellhaunt over Grotesque Demise because it's way more powerful. I'd rather have a Bellhaunt in my Orzhov deck. Whereas pick one, pack one, I'm just going to take Grotesque Demise because, hey, I'm going to be Rakdos like 40% of the time, Orzhov 60% of the time.
Exactly. And that's a really nice way to sum that up when it comes to the flexibility. So you should be sliding that scale lower and lower as the draft goes, but very high early on, because getting it, as we know, as you mentioned, drafting the hard way, getting into the right lane, making sure that the colors in the deck that you're trying to draft is actually the open one for your seat is so much more important than any one card.
Yeah.
And the difference, and we're not even talking about giving up an entire card. We're talking about the difference in power level between a good monocolored card and a good gold card. Yes, they are different, but as you said, at least half a grade is given up just because it's gold straight off the bat, and that's assuming that they're equal power level, which they aren't always equal power level.
Right, and one thing before we move on, also, this comes up when you look at sideboard cards too, which is you actually, by the time you're, hopefully late in the pack, having the choice between, mediocre main deck cards and good sideboard cards, you don't need that flexibility. You just know you're not going to put, Hazda Marshall or whatever that 3/2 is into your deck, very often, and you hope not to play it. So I'd rather take Exposed to Daylight because that's actually a card that when you do board it in will pay some dividends.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up all the time, right? That's something that people get stuck on a lot. But again, the flexibility thing is really important early, and then just gradually tail it, reduce it down once your confidence level goes up to what you're actually.
And that's why draft is so cool. Is that we, at the beginning where it's like flexibility this, flexibility that. I want to take the monocolor card, et cetera, and then very quickly 5 picks in, we're like, okay, we have our lane, we know where we're going. Flexibility no longer matters, and when to flip that switch is actually really important. A lot of drafts get ruined because you waffled for too long or you locked in too early, and hopefully we can help you kind of strike that balance a little better.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point about why the flexibility is so important, is because your actual draft could rely on it. Like we're talking about like risk of ruin level stuff, right? Like the 2 examples that you just gave of hanging on too long or committing too early are 2 of the most common ways for you to have a truly horrendous draft. Like, one of those ones where you just get the pile of cards at the end and you're going, oh no, like I waited way too long to try to figure out what colors I was in. And now I have all these cards that are in another set of colors that I'm not even able to play. I may be even short on playables, or I have to play a bunch of cards that are really junky compared to what my opponents are going to be playing. And that should, of course, be your number one concern, right? You always want to have a puncher's chance. You always want to give yourself a chance in the fight. And if you train wreck your draft, that's one of the times when you might
everyone's had these drafts, right? Where like you first pick a black card, you second pick a white card, and you're feeling okay about this. And then, but you took that, and then third pick, you take another black card over a good red card, but the black card's just good enough to make you stay in your lane. Fourth pick, you take the decent white card over like a pretty good red card, and you're just like, I don't think I'm supposed to switch. Then 5th, 6th, and 7th, you're just like looking brokenhearted as
nothing
skewers and lightning strikes and all these other things are just passing by you. And at the end of the draft, you're like, I passed the best red deck I've ever seen. And everyone has had this experience. And the tricky part is, maybe you weren't supposed to jump ship. Maybe you were. Maybe that the second red card was enough of a signal that you're like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to try to go a different direction here. And valuing flexibility helps, because what it does is the more flexible you are, the more times when you see a good card 5th or 6th pick or 7th pick, you get to then pivot and decide, wow, 7th pick Blade Juggler. Okay, time to throw out all of these blue cards. I'm now Orzhov because I was flexible when I took my white and blue cards, and I can just ditch these 2 blue cards. I took a mono white card over a white blue card. Well, that's actually hard to do because the mono white cards really suck in this format. But like, you know what I mean.
In this case, they do, yeah, yes. But they don't always.
But like, you took a 7 out of 10 mono white card over an 8 out of 10 blue white card. But now you get that 7th pick black card. You're really feeling like you got the payoff. You read the signals. I didn't actually write a tournament report yet, even though I'm still working on it for the Pro Tour. But that kind of happened to me. I wasn't Orzhov until late pack 2. And
wow, late in pack 2. That's insane.
Yeah. And it's obviously not a dream scenario, but getting consumes like 6-pick pack 2 and then grasping Thrall 7th, because I had taken a lot of flexible Esper-ish cards, I was able to just jump ship, and I got so richly rewarded pack 3, which is luck too, but it is also, the player to my left was blue-white and never switched into Orzhov and really got punished for it.
Wow. And I agree. I mean, it might be fortunate for you that the cards happen to be open, but you put yourself in a position to get them. Right. And so that was skill. And of course, we did see a little victory from you as well. The next thing that comes to mind, the next big factor that I think about, or at least one factor that comes to my mind.
And we've moved on from castability, by the way. Like we're no longer talking about the likelihood that these cards make your deck. We're just talking about what in general we look for in early picks.
Yes, great point. Right. So this is a kind of another lily pad to jump onto, and
both of us are way too heavy to jump on lily pads. We would just sink like a rock.
Okay. You did get me there. Replaceability, right? When I look at a card and I'm trying to decide, I'm balancing a lot of things: power level, castability, how often will it make my deck? How flexible does this keep me? But one of the things that does enter my brain as well is replaceability. How replaceable is this effect or this type of card for the type of deck that I'm going to be drafting here? And I got a couple of examples on why this is important, or at least how this is expressed in often in limited. One of them is removal, right? The ability to kill your opponent's creatures is generally sought after mainly because of its relative lack of replaceability. If you don't take the removal spell the first time you see it, it is unlikely that you're going to get another shot at it, especially when you get up to the really good, like uncommon removals, stuff like that, right? If you see a playable 3-drop creature and you don't take it, you don't sit there and think, oh man, I'm never going to get another shot at that, Rakdos whatever, right? The 3/2 guy or something. You don't sit there and like beat yourself up over a random 3-drop, because creatures are the backbone of limited and they're the thing that you see the most. But if you pass a Grotesque Demise, you're like, there's a chance I won't get one in this draft at all, or anything, like it. And the reason for that is because it's so hard to replace. So people jump on it and take it because there's just so much little of it there. Some sets, again, everything's different as it based on set, right? Some sets have a ton of good 2-drops, so you'll get all the 2s, right? We've played many formats like this where you're like, I'm drafting an aggressive deck and I'm going to take these 2-drops because I want them in my aggressive deck, and there's tons of good 2s. I'm going to end up with a bunch of them, where others have relatively few. And when you see one, you take it. You're like, this is a really important pick for my deck because I may not get many chances at good 2-drop creatures, and so I need to take them here.
Yeah, and a good example from this set is actually kind of funny, which is 5-drops, which to begin with, we don't put a big emphasis on 5-drops for all the reasons we've said. But in Ravnica Allegiance in particular, 5-drops are actually, there's just so many good ones, and especially if you're an Azorius, the whole Chillbringer and Azorius Lawbringer. Night Arbiter, whatever it is, the 5-mana 2/5 unblockable. The fact that both those cards exist mean that neither one is as high of a pick in Azorius as it would be otherwise, because you just know I'm going to find something there. Your 2-drop example is even the best one, because there's just a lot of formats that there's no good 2-drops or very few. So when you see one, you just have to take it because it is much less replaceable and you need a certain number to make your deck function.
Right. And then this also branches out into more unique effects too, right? Things that, this is part of the reason why like a sweeper is so sought after. Not only is it raw power level, but you just don't see them often, and you're never going to get another one, in a given draft because they come around so rarely. So replaceability is something that matters to me on some level. It is a function of power, right? Like ultimately, this is sort of a different lens on how powerful a card is going to be, because if there's relatively few options of it available in a given format, well, then just by definition, it has, more value and more power. But again, replaceability is something that you should be considering. Is this something that you can realistically get later on down the line? It's
mostly from like a meta perspective of this rewards you for knowing what's in the set. And so you tend not to figure this out until you've drafted a bunch or listen to people who drafted a bunch. But once you end up in a spot where you can know, okay, this format's short on X, Y, or Z, then you'll have a better idea.
Yeah, but I love that you brought that up, and it's super important because guess what? If you're listening to the show right now, you are receiving that type of information from us. But leveraging and actually employing that information can be tricky, and this is one of the ways that you can do that. If you listen to the set reviews and you listen to our weekly takes on the thing, if you listen to the testing insider episodes that Luis brings us, you are going to have a lot of information, and if there's you have a gap there between being able to actually implement it, this is one of the ways that you can do so. Another one that comes up often, especially in certain limited formats, which is synergy. In the first few picks, right? Think of your pack one, pick one. Synergy is not really much of a consideration at all. And this is kind of the opposite of flexibility, right? As the draft goes further, you start to have a better idea for what your deck actually is doing. And you may take a card that synergizes better with your deck over a traditionally more powerful option, which feels weird, right? Again, raw power is kind of your baseline. What are the things that can overthrow it? Flexibility can, replaceability can, synergy absolutely can. If you're drafting like a linear archetype, right? You're an artifact deck, or you're some tribal deck, your merfolk or your goblins or whatever, but you're lacking the cards that make up that deck, namely artifacts or goblins or whatever, then pack 3, you might be taking much less powerful picks than you normally would for those. You might be passing removal spells. You might be passing outright powerful stuff to get critical mass of merfolk or to get enough artifacts so that your deck actually works. And this happens a lot. And the more focused the archetype, the more likely you are to take, what you would consider suboptimal picks. If it was pack one, pick one to go into your deck. I mean, I remember, having watched people mainly, I've only drafted it a few times, but the first Mirrodin blocks, they really rewarded you for just having artifacts, right? Like with affinity and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's so to give you the best example of
give me a good example here
of how focused the affinity deck was. So the affinity mechanic in Mirrodin was when cards that have affinity for artifacts cost 1 less for every artifact you have. So. Mm-hmm. You really needed a critical mass of artifact, because if you had all the artifacts, you had 0 mana 4/4s and 1 mana 3/2 flyers, mm-hmm. right? That's busted.
4 mana 2/2s.
So yeah, right.
Or 0. Yeah.
Ben Stark, back at actually I think the first Pro Tour he ever top aided, he picked pick one, pack one, Seat of the Synod, which is an artifact land. It's just an island that counts as an artifact. That's all it is. Over what a lot of people consider the best uncommon in the set, which was
that's incredible.
Yes,
that's like taking a Guildgate over Mortify or whatever you think the best card.
That is, I mean, the best uncommon was Grab the Reins, or at least a lot of people said it was, which was you steal a creature, then sack it, and deal damage equal to its power.
Ooh, that is powerful. My God.
Yeah. Right, but it costs 7 mana, and Ben thought the affinity deck was the best deck in the format. And Ben is a person known for his extreme views,
indeed,
and not in a bad way, but like when he's identified what he thinks is the best, he's just going to go after it. He thought affinity was the best, and he took pick one, pack one, Seat of the Sign over Grab the Reins.
Which is I mean, that's almost taking a basic land over a super powerful uncommon just for synergy. Now that's a great super extreme example, but still
that's an extreme example, but it shows you how important synergy is. Another example of really synergy driven formats are Masters Edition. And I remember at one of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, right? Just when I was drafting green white tokens, just like all I was looking at are cards that made tokens or cards that rewarded you for having a lot of creatures. Basically nothing else. Mm-hmm. Like all I cared about was like convoke cards and ways to put tokens into play, and sometimes convoke cards that did put tokens into play. Mm-hmm. And I would not have taken like Sarah Angel, like 5 mana 4/4 flying vigilance over one of these convoke cards, because my deck wasn't about that. It was about playing 15 lands and convoking out tokens.
Yeah. Great example. So, I mean, again, these are a bigger picture view on all this stuff, by the way, is if power level is kind of the train rolling forward, what is it going to take to get you to steer that train in a different direction? Right. And these are some of the things that will do this. Synergy being one of the really important ones in certain situations. Like there's a lot of sets that, like, if you draft core set, synergy doesn't often come up. right? Where you're just going to take raw power level. Even in Ravnica Allegiance, there's not actually a lot of synergy. Am I wrong about that? There's not, right?
No, you're not.
The colors and power level.
As much as I live for just saying you're wrong about things,
you're going to throw me a bone here.
Yeah, there really isn't. Like, look, I even talked about High Alert earlier, right? Which part of the strength of High Alert, part of why I talk it up, whenever we talk about it, is because you can just put it in your normal Azorius decks and it's good.
Yeah,
like. I think that Ravnica Allegiance is a kind of low synergy format, and that's totally fine. I enjoy all kinds of formats, and this one has hit a good balance.
Yeah, but again, in the right format, think of a master set or a more archetype driven one. Then synergy is going to often lead you to take what looks like a less powerful card over a more powerful one.
And this is the sort of thing where once you are fairly confident you're in a synergy deck, you will start to realize like how much your picks have to be slated that direction, and some formats have more of that than others. Even looking at like something like Boros, right, from Guilds of Ravnica, once you're in a dedicated Boros deck where your curve wants to top out at around 3 or 4, at that point, you're kind of effectively taking synergy cards because you're just not taking cards that aren't creatures or combat tricks or removal that cost 3 or less mana.
Yeah. Hey, another good example, by the way, for that Boros deck.
I'll be the judge of that.
Going back to replaceability, right, is you might have like a pretty good removal suite for your Boros deck from Guilds of Ravnica. You're feeling pretty good. You've got a couple of enchantments to lock down big stuff and some cheaper burn spells. And you're like, okay, I'm in an okay place with this. And you might open up a mediocre removal spell or Cosmotronic Wave. And Cosmotronic Wave is an effect that is hard to replace, right? Your average removal spell doesn't actually let you do that, yet it could be the way that you win the game, especially if you value it super highly, which I didn't end up valuing super highly. But it could be an effect that you look and you go, you know what? I really need a way to push through the last damage here, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And you might take it over a removal spell, for example. Next one.
7 out of 10 example.
All right. Thank you. I'll take it.
It's above the average.
Wait, I thought 5 was average.
As I said, it's above the average.
Oh, I thought you said it's about the average. Okay. Above average. I'm in. Next one. And by the way, this next one is a really good example of one that is a factor, but is not such a huge factor. In fact, it's quite a minor factor. It's just one thing that you do consider, which is wheelability, the likelihood that a card that you pass might come back to you. So that if you think you could take, a card that you like, here's an example. Rate this one. Clear the Mind. Let's say you really do want Clear the Mind in your deck, but you feel that it could come back around. And even though it's an important part of your strategy and it's a card that you really kind of need, if it's pack 3, pick 1, and you need to Clear the Mind, but there's a Law Mage's Binding in the pack, you're just going to take the Law Mage's Binding because you've determined that the Clear the Mind is much, much, much more likely to wheel, and you can take that risk.
Yeah.
I want a number here. 8 out of 10 example? 9 out of 10?
No, that's a solid 8 out of 10 example. Sure.
Come on, you couldn't give me a 9 on that one?
Well, the thing is, you almost never take. Yes, you would not. You would not. That's not some like that. The power level gap between those cards is so high that I guess that is a good example.
You guess that is all right. I begrudgingly got him to admit it was. So this again is not a major factor, right? Because each of these things weigh in differently at different times. And the fact is that wheelability almost never weighs in heavily, right?
Basically never, yeah.
Right. Like with synergy, sometimes it is the factor that I use to take a pick. Sometimes with flexibility, it is the factor. Most of the time, it's power level that I care about. But with wheelability, that's almost never the reason that I make a pick. It just adds to the weight on one side or the other a little tiny bit. Another one that comes up, and this one's a little bit more abstract, but it absolutely matters, which are signals. And the primary function of signals in limited is not this. This is just, again, something that you'll add to the scales on one side or the other. So there's 2 different types of signals. There's the signals that you're sending and the signals that you're receiving. When we make a pick, we have to strongly consider the signals we have coming from our right side, the person passing to us.
Extremely strongly consider those signals and very, very weakly consider the signals we send.
Exactly. Because think about the signals that we receive, right? This will often change my picks from the highest power level to something that I feel is more open in the long term. right? If it's pack 1, pick 7, something like that. And I have determined that my opponent has, taken a certain archetype and that they're kind of in it. I will often warp my picks around trying to get out of their way, basically, and trying to find my own little home, right? The whatever it is that I think is open. That is not just me looking at a pack in a vacuum and saying, I want to take this card because I think it's the most powerful and has the highest chance of actually making my deck. That's not what you're doing in that spot.
Yeah.
Conversely, as you just mentioned, Luis, the signals that you're sending, though we put very little weight on these, are the cards that we're passing to our left. These should never really trump any of the above considerations.
I almost just want to tell people who are listening right now that you should just not think about the signals you're passing to your left. Just don't. Because
you think they'd be better off just not even thinking about it at all.
Yes, I think that. So here's a couple main fallacies that errors that people make. One, you open a pack with 2 excellent red cards and 1 good black card. And again, this is format agnostic, so don't worry about Rakdos or anything like that. And a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, I would take the black card because there's 2 good red cards in this pack, or 3 good red cards in this pack." And you should just take the best card. You should take the better card there. The signals you're passing to your left just doesn't matter that much, because first of all, when you pass a card, you don't know what your opponent, or the person to your left rather, first picked, so they might not even take the card you thought they would take. And then second, if they're the same color as you, it's just not a disaster. They're to your left. Another error people make, let's say, you remember that previous example where you were kind of black-white and you were passing all these red cards and you should have switched? Some people in that case, as an argument against switching, will say, well, I already shipped 2 red cards in a row. They'll read those signals. And it just doesn't matter, because yes, you would prefer the person to your left be different colors, definitely. But the person to your right is so much more important, and you have so much more control. Because yes, maybe you pass those 2 red cards, but if you cut the whole pack off of red cards for the next 6 picks, if the person to your left is a drafter who is really paying attention to that, it might scare them off. Of course, depending where you're drafting, that won't happen. But it's the sort of thing that does matter. And I really, really don't want people to be worrying too much about the signals they're passing. So I would say, and I guess I'll leave this exercise up to the listener, if you feel like you are excellent at drafting, because I think that's the bar. If you feel you're excellent at drafting, you can start to consider that and maybe have that shape your picks. But honestly, I think the average person that plays at the Pro Tour still reads too much into the signals they're passing. And that is a big statement.
That really is. Yeah.
So I've talked to people who play at the Pro Tour who will say stuff like, "Oh yeah, I didn't want to take the Mortify because there was also a Grasping Throw in the pack, so I took Skewer." And I'm just like, don't do that.
Just don't do that. Yeah. And this is also this is a really interesting thing, because we could talk about this, right? I could tell you, well, you're saying it doesn't matter that much, but you know what? It does represent 1/3 of the packs that are going to get passed to you. And if you can successfully completely cut off a color, you could absolutely put that person to your left out of a color, and therefore you could be more likely to get more of that color in one of the 3 packs. So there is something to be gained from that. But what we've recognized is that the actual gain is not bigger. The gain that you get from doing these things is not bigger than just taking the better cards for your deck and letting the person to your left kind of, do whatever they are going to do. So the interesting thing comes in on application of these concepts, right? If we talk about this concept on the show, we have to trust our listeners to understand that this is a very low impact concept, similar to wheelability.
Yeah.
Right. And that's hard to do, right? Because people are really, they struggle with applying concepts. I've seen this in poker my whole life where, what's the most important thing about a poker hand? Well, it's the strength of your hand, right? That's the most important thing. And you'll hear people say, oh, well, I folded this really strong hand because these things happen. And you look at them like, but you had an insanely strong hand. That should have been a bigger factor in your decision-making than any of this other stuff, this fancy play stuff, or these patterns that you recognized, or any of these other things. The thing that mattered was that you had a super strong hand, and you shouldn't have ever folded it in this situation. You see that all the time. And this is kind of what we're going for here as well. Well, what's the most important thing? Well, it's the power level of the card. Are there things that could change your mind? Yeah. And we've talked a lot about them. But you have to really understand that when we talk about synergy, replaceability, chance of making the deck, these really important things that could absolutely sway you into taking a less powerful card over a more powerful one in a vacuum. Wheelability, the signals that you send, these are so much. I mean, this is 5% versus 95%. It's nothing. It's a thing that, as Luis is saying here, if you just ignored it, you might actually be better off because you wouldn't screw it up at any point, because humans are so tricky with that stuff. And I've certainly been on the bad end of this as well. But let's focus on the important part. The signals that you're receiving do matter a lot, and they can change how you might think a pick could go. So keep that in mind for sure, and then just significantly reduce the value on it. I have it at like tiebreaker level. Like for your example, let's say there's 3 good red cards and 1 good black card, and I rate them all an 8. Right? Just across the board, they're all an 8. I'll take the black card. Sure. Yes. Right? Like that's reasonable for me. It makes sense. It's just that doesn't ever happen. Right? One of the cards is going to be better than the rest. And if it was an 8.2, I would take the 8.2 red card. Like, that's the thing.
People just always use this to justify taking
fancy play syndrome.
Yeah, it's fancy. You want to feel clever. You want to feel like I understand something most people don't, and for that reason, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And you know what really clever people understand is that winning is sweet, and winning is kind of the ultimate expression of being clever, even if it doesn't feel that way. All right. Well, I have one more. And again, I kind of put these in rough order. So one more factor that I do consider, though this is probably lower than all the rest, which is experimentation. Early on in a format, I will weigh my pick slightly towards interesting rares or cards that that have effects that I haven't ever played before and that are difficult to evaluate, because I want to know. I want to learn for myself. Is this a good card? Partially to talk about it on here, but also just for the rest of the format.
It's an investment in the future, because let's say pick one, pack one, you open a bomb uncommon and a mythic that you don't know how good it is. Well, by the end of the format, you'll have played with this uncommon 17 times, and you don't really need to learn whether Shark to Crab is a 9 or a 10. And, it's like a 10. Shark to Crab's awesome. But when you open, say Mass Manipulation, you're like, wow, quad blue. Or, you open Zagana, right? Or not Zagana, Vanifar, the birthing pod.
Yeah.
And it turns out birthing pod's worse than Shark to Crab. You should take Shark to Crab. But pick one, pack one in a new format. I'm just going to take the mythic that I'm not going to get to play with again, because, A, the show, but B, also, like, when I open this card at a tournament with stakes, I want to know which one's better. I want to be able to provide that information.
Yeah. And so that's a nice, again, just minor tiebreaker. And that one is totally skippable. Like if you just don't care about that, no problem. Like, but you should, it really is good information to get.
The other thing, by the way, is, I don't want to lose the fact that also, winning is fun, but Magic's also just a game. It's supposed to be fun. And a lot of times I think that taking a rare or mythic you don't have a chance to play with just broadens your play experiences and can be more fun, even if, maybe it's not the actual best. Like taking Priest of Forgotten Gods and trying to draft around it, it might be a little bit more fun than trying to draft Blade Juggler for the 15th time, though I would take Blade Juggler first pick.
Yeah, there you go. All right, what are the takeaways here? First, being good at limited, it's not something you can throw an acronym
at doing examples.
That's one of our takeaways.
I'll let you say the actual useful things.
I'm slightly above average in an example. Being good at limited isn't something you can throw acronyms at and a few pick orders, right? Like that's why we shy away from those things on here. We want people that are listening to the show that are actually trying to get good at this, because we've seen it happen time and time again where people have said, I started listening to your show, I sucked, now I win my F&Ms, now I'm going to go play my first GP, now I'm doing well on Magic Online or on Arena, and that's where we want you to get. That's where we want our players to do, is to keep developing over time. And it's things like B.R.E.A.D. Yeah, sure. If you've literally never drafted before, it's better than nothing, but it wears itself out so quickly that it's not even really worth considering. This is not the way that you actually improve at it. In order to actually understand what's going on, you have to put all of these concepts together, which is really hard. It's just that if you can start understanding the fundamentals on each one, you'll actually make progress on it. So put the B.R.E.A.D. back on the shelf and dive with us into the details every single week on this show, right? This is what we do here. We put in the work, and you will too. And fundamentally, you'll understand and apply these techniques and these ideas, and your game will improve straight up. You can record your next draft, for example, and you can post it on the subreddit or the Discord channel or on social media or to your friend or your play group. And you can ask, am I being too cute? right? Sometimes it's just like, that's the most powerful card. You take it because it's the most powerful card and you move on to the next pick. And sometimes it's like, well, actually, that one has a lot more flexibility, or that's in a color pair or a type of archetype that I'd much rather be in. So it's actually I'm going to actually take the slightly less powerful card over the more powerful one. Are you being too cute with your picks? This is a good way to find out that thing right there. If you're reasonably applying some version of the algorithm that we've laid out here, you're going to be in good shape, right? You're going to actually have a decent understanding of how these things play out in real life, and you're going to be able to adapt to any limited situation. And that's a huge skill to have, because the pick order lists don't do that. They teach you how to draft one format, and they don't even do a good job at that. If you're doing what we're talking about here every single time you draft, and if you have an understanding of these concepts, you're going to be able to draft any format. It won't matter, right? It's just there. I asked a few, kind of trusted drafters, BDM and Ryan and a few others, for their takes on this, and their lists were all similar. And I didn't tell them my list first, or what Luis and I came up with. I just said, "What do you think about when you sit down to draft?" And they did it. And you know what? Yours will get there too if you keep on working hard to improve your game. So we're going to be here for the whole ride, and we hope you'll come along with us. That's going to do it for this one.
Put down the bread and pick up steak. That's sick cards, top picks, efficient cards.
K for castability.
Yeah, castability.
Yeah, so we'll put down the dinner, and next week we'll be back to our normal show. We'll see you then. All right, Luis.
You didn't do the closing. You didn't tell people where they can find us.
I'm going to do that.
You can find me.
Oh, you're right. I didn't. Oh my God.
You can find Marshall at Marshall_LR. I think I don't really know. It's kind of a long thing. You can find all episodes at lrcast.com. This show's sponsor is, of course, channelfireball.com, your best source for Magic strategy on the internet. And if you want to spend some bread or make some bread, you can buy cards from us or sell us cards. You get a 30% trade-in bonus, which you can then spend on bread.
Wow.
The show's brought to you by you, the Patreon, with which Marshall buys bread.
Wow, I like this. You're good at that, Luis. I give you a 7.
All right, so I'm above average in terms of closing.
Yes. All right, now we're going to get to the sign-off and the much-anticipated return of Let's Stump Vargas.
Yeah, I felt like being challenged because the Pro Tours recently just aren't doing it for me.
All right, well, wow. Well, this is going to be much harder than
this is going to be an aside. Before we get to the actual sign-off, I want to say that I think that professional Magic could use more people talking trash. Like,
oh my God, I would kill for that from the booth. I would love it. Oh.
Like, I tried to get it started on Twitter before the Invitational. I'll probably try again. But like, I just think that why are we being so serious? Like, yes, we're playing for a lot of money. Yes, this is important. It's professional. It's all that. Don't win the game and act like, you don't care. Don't lose the game and act like you don't care. And honestly, like, what's wrong with saying, you're going to beat someone or you think you're better than someone. I don't know. I kind of like all these things. I also like poking fun at people. Like,
do you?
I told Nassif I was coming for him in the washed up Hall of Famer turned streamer category.
See, that's just fun, man. I like it too. I wish it had just a little bit more of
everyone is just so like trying to I think there's just this ethos of not showing emotion.
Yeah,
like when someone wins the finals of the Pro Tour and you see them de-sideboarding,
it drives me nuts. Yeah, and I mean you contrast that with like the last Mythic Championship winner, Autumn, and Autumn was just like broke down in tears, and it's like it was really obvious how much it meant to them. It's like
I just like emotion. Like I get that people are going to focus and you're going to try to play your best, and part of that is not worrying about outside factors or whatever, but I don't know. You've seen me when I play against someone who I feel comfortable enough with, like when I play against Owen or Cheon or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just like up to all this kind of buffoonery. And I just wish more people did that. And I wish I could feel more comfortable doing that with other people. But I just feel like it would be too much like punching down or whatever. I think that there were some people who would not take that well. And I don't really want to be there. So.
All right, impromptu Luis buffoonery with Owen and Cheon. I have 2. I have number 2 you just kept activating creature land on end step just to see if Paul would do anything, even though it was completely irrelevant. He's like, yeah, sure, you did it. You're like, my turn? Yeah, it's your turn. Go. I already said that. I'm tapped out. And the other one was when you were playing against Owen Turtenwald in the semifinals of the Pro Tour, and you well, two things. One, you told him before the game that you hoped that one of you got horrendously mana screwed and lost horribly. And then you also pulled out a token of yourself and signed it for him and slid it across the table to him, which, by the way, he still has. So I guess
the best line I had actually was Owen mind-slavered me with Emrakul, the Promised End. And he's on my turn thinking about what to do. And I'm like, oh, and none of my turns have ever taken this long.
He said he's taking more time on your turn than you were.
Which is also true. None of my turns in the tournament took that long.
No, it's true. It was really funny. Okay, let's get this.
See, here's the thing. Before we get to the Cracker Pack, because this is even better anyway.
Yeah, it kind of is.
If I did that to someone I didn't know as well, it would feel like bullying to me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being like overcautious there. But I just feel like, what if I like round 2 play against like someone who won a PTQ? It's their first Pro Tour, and I'm just sitting there like running my mouth at them. That just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, well, at any rate, it would not be taken. Like, even if the person was okay with it, it just isn't a good look.
It just doesn't feel. It feels
not great for that. Yeah.
You got to read the room, and that just didn't feel right for me.
Yeah. Well, but you can beat up on Cheon all day. All right,
let's
try to help you here. This is this one comes from Timothy S. And Luis, I'm not going to lie, I've got a hard mode pack for you here, buddy.
Timothy S. isn't even good at stumping. Why are they even submitting a pack?
I've got wow. You're just going to start talking trash.
Well, I think our listeners are fair game.
I've got a pack. Wow. I've got a pack of Mercadian masks.
Okay. Actually, Timothy made a good choice. Mercadian masks. And, everyone has these dead zones, right? Because almost no one plays Magic continuously from start to finish. Like there are times when you're just less invested or take a break or whatever. And masks is right in the middle of my dead zone.
And this is a set with a lot of text on it. So I'm going to kind of blast through this. What's the over under here? 4?
No. It'll be higher than that. But like,
I'm not sure how much you've drafted it because, like, I think I would get 0 or 1 of these.
Masks is a 50. If it's a 15 card pack, I don't remember the exact pack size. I think I'm going to get a little more than half, 7 or 8.
Okay, well, we'll set it at 7.5. All right, so good luck, man. First card is called Sapratson Scary.
That's a land.
Yes, and I want to just give it to you based on that, but anyway.
Yeah, I think it enters the battlefield tapped, and this is the one that you can. You can tap with 2 counters. You tap and remove a counter to add blue.
Yep,
and then when you tap the second time, it dies.
Yeah, you are correct. They're called depletion counters. All right, well, you're 1 for 1. Spectre's Whale.
Oh, this one's easy. I think this is 1 in a black. Target player discards a card at random.
Yep, that's right. Highway Robber.
2 black 2/2 and enters the battlefield. Drain your opponent for 2.
Wow, you are. Did you lie? Did you draft the hell out of this set?
No, I really haven't. But like these cards have also been reprinted. Well, Scary hasn't, but that was part of a tier 1 deck. And then Highway Robber has just been reprinted a million times. It's a mercenary, I think.
It is a mercenary. Wait, how did you know that? What does it have to do with it being reprinted?
You can fetch it with mercenaries.
Are you talking about what's it called? It's not mercenaries, but the other things.
Rebels?
Yeah.
Well, see, here's a little known fact. Rebels and mercenaries are 2 opposing, factions in the same set, but rebels are good and mercenaries are bad. So everyone remembers rebels and no one remembers mercenaries. Rebels go up.
But there's ways to search up.
So rebels have cheap creatures that you can pay expensive amounts to get bigger creatures. Yeah. Mercenary, you can pay cheap amounts to get cheaper creatures. That's less powerful.
I did not know that. All right. Rishadan Cutpurse.
This is 2 and a blue for a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, your opponent sacrifices a permanent unless they pay, I think, 2. No, just one.
It's 1, and I'm giving it to you. Thunderclap.
1 and a red, deal 3 to your opponent or 4 damage to a flying creature. No. 2 and a red, deal 3 to any target instant. You can sack a mountain to pay for it.
That's right. It is actually target creature, but I'm still giving that to you. Deepwood Wolverine. And by the way, Wolverines are real.
I don't remember this one. I think it's like 2 and a green, 2/2, and it gets +1 for each creature or blocks it.
You are actually really close. It's green for a 1/1 that gets +2/+0 for each creature.
I'm going to count that one as a miss.
Okay. Not that it's your choice, but I also do. Ramosian Lieutenant.
Oh yeah, this was a classic.
This is a classic. Oh, it's a rebel.
It's a rebel. Yeah. So, it's not a sergeant. Hold on, lieutenant. Because I know this...
or lieutenant, if you will.
No, I will not. I think this is the 1-mana 1/1 that you can pay 3 and tap, or was it 1? Yeah, it's a 1/1. I think you can pay 3 and tap and get a rebel that costs 2, or something like that. What is it?
This is a different one. This is 1 and a white for a 1/2. You can pay 4 to get a rebel that costs 3.
Oh, I see. Okay,
you're off by 1 on all accounts. Remosian Rally.
2 and a white. Give all your creatures +1/+1 at instant speed. I think you can sack up planes to play it.
Let's see here. So it's 3 and a white. Instant. Yes, all your creatures get +1/+1. If you control planes, you may tap an untapped creature you control instead of paying its mana cost.
Weird.
What?
Masks was a weird set. Like some cards really you can cast by sacking lands, some by tapping creatures. They had a lot of weird alternate costs in that set.
All right. How about Deadly Insect?
Oh, this is a reprint from Alliances, so it's 4 and a green for a 6/1 Shroud.
Yeah, that is correct. Balloon Peddler. Nice artwork.
It's 2 and a blue for a 2/2. It's a Spell Shaper. You can pay a blue tap and discard a card to give a creature flying.
Yeah. Wow. How did you know it was a Spell Shaper? Is that relevant?
There's a cycle of them, like Waterfront Bouncer.
Oh, okay. Wait, but this is also blue. Anyway, Rampart Crawler.
This is, I think, red for like a 1/1, and you can pay 1 and a red. It can only be blocked by walls this turn.
No, you're close. So it's actually black.
Oh.
For a 1/1, it's a mercenary. It says Rampart Crawler can't be blocked by walls.
Oh, I see.
Sort of static ability. Haunted Crossroads.
This is...
By the way, we're in our uncommons now.
Yeah, this is 2 and a... It's like a 2 and a black enchantment that has like a black activation. I think it lets you put creatures from your graveyard on top of your deck.
You're right. Wow. And by the way, that was the one that got you over the over-under.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 and a black enchantment. Black, put a target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Arms Dealer.
Oh yeah, this one's also a classic. 2 and a red goblin, 1/1 goblin. You can pay 1 and a red. I think you sack a goblin to do 4 damage to any creature.
That is correct. Glowing Anemone.
I remember a picture of this one. I think it's like 3 and a blue for like a 2/2 or something. And I don't remember.
Well, this part's sweet.
It's like when it attacks and isn't blocked, you draw a card or something.
No, you're close. So it's 3 and a blue for a 1/3. It's a beast. When it ETBs, you may return target land to its owner's hand.
Well, that sounds nonsensical, but okay.
Yeah, I like that. All right, your rare is Lithophage.
Oh, that's 3 red for like a 7/7, and each upkeep it eats one of your lands, I think.
Yeah, it actually sacrifices a mountain, but you're getting credit. Wow, you really this is your dark 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got 10 right.
All right.
Boy, he still got it.
Yeah.
He still got it. Nice work.
I credit all my Pro Tour success at memorizing thousands of old cards.